Hello, my name is Giles. Welcome to training for Oracle Financials Cloud in Oracle Fusion Payables and Receivables. In this session, we talk about customer and supplier balance netting in the Oracle Financials Cloud. For the enhancements covered in this training, we'll give an overview, followed by more detail to explain how you can use them and what business value they bring. Then we'll walk you through a demonstration. Next, we'll explain what you need to consider before enabling these features in your business and what you need to know to set them up. The netting feature allows you to enable the automatic netting of payables and receivables transactions within a business enterprise and issue payments and receipts for the netted amounts. Netting agreements can be defined that incorporate the netting business rules such as transaction selection criteria to support your business practices. The netting process automatically creates the payables payments and receivables receipts required to clear a selected number of payables and receivables transactions. The functionality allows you to fine-tune netting settlements prior to completion. In this presentation, we will cover the prerequisite setup, how to define netting agreements, creating and managing settlements, and finally, how to inform your third parties of netted transactions via netting letters. The netting agreements user interface allows you to define how you want to select transactions to net between you and your trading partner. Invoices and transactions can be filtered out of the selection process via the pay groups, different invoice types and transaction types. You can assign multiple suppliers, supplier sites, and customer sites to an agreement that represent your trading partner. Here, you can also define how you want the netting letters to be generated, who to send them to, and which language to print them in. The netting process will select transactions for netting based on the business rules and options you set on the agreement. The Create Netting Settlements user interface allows you to start creating a settlement or a group of settlements. You can also determine which dates to choose when selecting the invoices and transactions. The Manage Netting Settlements user interface allows you to download a settlement to a spreadsheet if you want to review or change a settlement prior to actual completion. You can also delete a settlement or even reverse a settlement that has already been settled. We will cover this in more detail in the demo. Netting is best explained within an example. Imagine your company trades with Valencia Farming. Valencia Farming is both your supplier, since they sell you fresh fruit, and they are your customer. You sell them machinery. Over a period of 6 months, Valencia Farming have sent you 247 invoices that total just over €234,000. Similarly, over the last 6 months, you sent them 434 invoices totaling just over €212,000 for machinery parts. Instead of all 681 transactions being paid separately, you have set up an agreement with Valencia Farming to net transactions every 6 months, with any outstanding balance to be paid separately as a one-off payment or to be netted in a future netting settlement. Your netting manager runs the netting process. Since the total that you owe them is more than the total that they owe you, all of the receivables transactions are marked as paid by netting. You are also able to mark 227 payables invoices as netted, since they total the same amount on the receivables side. Therefore, 661 transactions are automatically settled, and Valencia Farming are sent an email with the details of all transactions that have been netted. You are now left with only 20 invoices and payables left to pay Valencia Farming, which total just over €21,000. You can opt to either pay these separately or leave them as unpaid for a future netting settlement. The netting functionality helps you to quickly settle payments and receipts with your trading partners without the need to create physical payments. If your third party is both your customer and your supplier, and you send and receive many invoices to each other, then netting will enable you to quickly net off the invoices and transactions. Indeed, multiple settlements can be created for each invoice currency that you send or receive with your third party. Since the netting agreement allows you to combine multiple customers and suppliers that represent your trading partner, you can more easily manage the netting of invoices across different sites. The agreement can also filter in or out certain types of invoices or transactions to be netted based on your business requirements. The process allows the netting manager to review a proposed settlement prior to completion, and this enables you to fine-tune the settlement, such as removing or adding other transactions or forcing certain invoices to be netted. Once completed, the process will automatically email your trading partner details of all invoices that were netted. The payments and receipts are created as part of the process, and these can easily be identified as those that are settled via the netting process. Here is the summary of the features I have talked about today. Firstly, how to set up the netting agreement, comprising the business rules and preferences that determine how a netting settlement will select eligible transactions. The pay groups, payables invoice types, and receivable transaction types have shown you how you can specify to a greater detail the types of invoices and transactions to select. The trading partner setup has been shown, giving you the flexibility to restrict to a single customer or supplier site, or to include multiple sites that comprise your trading partner to which the agreement refers to. The generation of netting letters enables you to email the third-party recipient the details of the netted transactions. The agreements can be end-dated to reflect the end of an agreement. Once an agreement is end-dated, future settlements cannot be performed between you and the trading partner unless a new agreement is set up. In summary, the netting agreement setup gives you a great deal of flexibility to determine which invoices and transactions you wish to include as part of a netting settlement. Here is the summary of the settlement process I have talked about today. Firstly, the settlement creation, which submits the settlement process to select the eligible transactions that meet the criteria set out on the agreement. Settlements can be created for a single agreement, for a group of agreements that share the same netting group, or for all agreements that you have defined. The Download Settlement to Spreadsheet feature allows the netting manager to fine-tune the settlement before the settlement actually takes place. Invoices and transactions can be prioritized, removed, and added during this step. Once the netting manager has reviewed the details, the settlement can be submitted. When it is submitted, the following takes place. Firstly, the invoices and transactions are marked as paid. Then, the payment and receipt numbers are generated. And finally, if the agreement is set up to send netting letters via email, an email will be automatically sent to the trading partner, listing all the invoices and transactions that were netted. If a settlement has been created and is in selected or selected with no transactions status, and you have decided that the settlement is no longer required, you can delete a settlement. If a settlement has been created and is in settled status, indicating that the payments and receipts have already been created, but you have realized that the settlement was erroneously created, you can then reverse a settlement. Reversing a settlement will void the payments and reverse the receipts. The invoices and transactions from the settlement will then be available once again for future netting settlements. Only settlements that are settled can be reversed. In this implementation advice section, we'll go through what you need to consider before enabling these features in your business and what you need to know to set them up. This table depicts key update information for the new feature covered in this training. The customer and supplier balance netting feature in this training is automatically available after update. The feature has setup associated with it, and the setup specifics are covered later in this section. All features can be accessed through existing shipped job roles. When implementing netting, there are some factors that you need to consider. Based on the answers to the following questions, the setup will differ. Firstly, will you settle for different currencies for your trading partner? If so, you'll need to pay particular attention to the multi-currency flag on the bank account to ensure it is selected. If you intend to have more than one customer set up on a single agreement, then you'll also need to check that the Allow Payment of Unrelated Transactions is checked on the Receivables system options. If you want to process settlements in a group, then you can set up a netting group, which will run settlements for each agreement that belong to the netting group. If you wish to further restrict the types of invoices and payables to select, you can set up a separate pay group for netting. If you want to send letters by email to your trading partners, you need to set up the Generate Netting functionality and ensure that a default email subject is entered in the lookup provided. Finally, and most importantly, will you want to review settlements prior to settlement? Or would you prefer to select and settle in a single step without review? All of these points will be discussed in more detail in the setup demo. The setup for customer and supplier balance netting is achieved by the following setup activities. I will indicate in the next few slides which setup steps are mandatory and which are optional. The key setup steps are the security role assignment, netting bank account, the receipt class and receivables system options, the netting group, the pay group, and the netting letter. Before the netting agreements and settlements can be created, there are some mandatory and optional setup steps. Firstly, access to the netting user interfaces is only made available to those users who have the customer and supplier balance netting duty role assigned. This is to ensure that only key personnel can perform the netting process. And once they have been given access, the netting user interfaces are made available via the Payments work area in AP and the Accounts Receivable work area in Receivables. Netting can only be successfully completed if the netting manager running the process has access to the business units that own the transactions and the necessary roles required to create payments and in particular receipts. Those same users must also be assigned access to the payables and receivables roles and have data access to all business units that you intend to use in the netting process. A netting bank account is a fictitious account and must be assigned to netting agreements. You will need to check the netting account in the General tab on the Create Bank Account user interface. For netting settlements that are for multiple currencies, for example, if you create a settlement that nets within each currency, you must check the Multi-Currency Account checkbox in the General tab. Finally, assign the business units to the bank account in the Business Units Access tab. The bank account must also have access to the business units that you want to include as part of your netting process. Setting up the receipt class. Oracle have seeded a receipt method for netting, which is the Aura_APAR netting receipt class. This is required in order to process receipts that are created in a settlement. Navigate to manage receipt classes and methods in Setup and Maintenance. Search for the receipt method of Aura_APAR netting, and then assign your business unit and account that is set up in the Netting Bank Account Setup section in the Feature Specific Setup. To process the cash receipts within receivables, you must allow the payment of unrelated transactions if you want to net for multiple customers in a settlement. This should be selected if you have multiple customers defined on a single agreement. In such cases, the same receipt number can be used on different customer sites. If your agreements only have a single customer, then this setup step is not required. Netting groups allow the netting manager to optionally create settlements for multiple agreements at the same time. You can implement netting groups to group together similar business-related agreements for settlements. For example, if you want to net for different trading partners or industries, in this example, retail banking, distributors, farm and trading partners, or petroleum trading partners, enter the netting group that can be associated to an agreement. This means that if you want to net for only the agreements that are for the petroleum trading partner group, you can signify this when creating a settlement. The netting process will ignore netting for the other agreements that aren't assigned to the petroleum netting group. You can add as many netting groups as you wish to differentiate between the different netting agreement types. However, only one netting group can be assigned to an agreement. If you do not assign a netting group to your agreements, then when you create a settlement, all agreements will be selected, unless you opt to select a single agreement. Whilst the netting groups control the types of agreements to settle, the pay group functionality can help control the types of payables transactions to select when building a netting settlement. If, for example, you know which transactions are eligible for netting when the transactions are entered, either manually, spreadsheet import, or invoice imaging, the payables invoices can be created with a predefined pay group that can be assigned to your agreement. The netting letter and netting reversal letter can be optionally emailed to the third party. If you choose this option, you can also predefine the email subject by entering the meaning on the lookup code. In this example, the third party will have an email from you with the subject Netting Settlement Letter. If you opt to send the letters by post, then you can skip this step. Once this is complete, all of the netting setup steps are complete, and you can start to set up the netting agreements. Netting can only be successfully completed if the netting manager running the process has access to the business units that own the transactions and the necessary roles required to create payments and in particular receipts. Assign the netting duty role Customer and Supplier Balance Netting to only those users who will create netting agreements and netting settlements. Those same users must also be assigned access to the payables and receivables roles, and have data access to all business units that you intend to use in the netting process. The business processes associated with the new capabilities covered in this training are detailed here. The high-level business process is manage cash transactions with activities, manage netting agreements, and manage netting settlements. The reports that cover the new features are as follows. Firstly, the netting settlement letter. If the Generate Netting Letter was selected for the agreement, a letter will be generated each time a settlement takes place. The letter can then be sent to your third party. The netting settlement report is automatically run when the netting manager submits a settlement or creates a settlement without review. You can access the report from the Financial Reporting Center. Similarly, the netting settlement listing is an internal report in spreadsheet format for the netting manager to review. It is also automatically run when the netting manager submits a settlement or creates a settlement without review. Again, you can access the report from the Financial Reporting Center. Finally, the netting reversal letter will automatically run when the netting manager reverses a settlement. This report lists all of the invoices and transactions that were voided and reversed. It is recommended that you also refer to the topical essay for netting, which provides further details and examples of how to implement netting groups and discount functionality. This concludes this presentation. Thanks very much for listening. You can easily pause and rewind any of these slides if you require additional time to take in the detail.